Most people believe that magnetism lies in visible beauty, a sculpted body, rare perfume, or carefully chosen words. But all of this is an illusion. True magnetism does not come from appearance, but from the psychic energy that permeates every gesture, every silence, every glance. Carl Jung said, "What you repress controls you. What you integrate emanates from you. What attracts is not what you show, but what you contain." The body can be admired, but if the energy that sustains it is insecure, it repels. It is the inner density, that mixture of integrated shadow and restrained desire, that makes someone truly irresistible. Magnetic people have learned to walk in silence without fading away, to sustain gazes that seem to pierce invisible layers. Magnetism is not about having, but about containing. Containing the impulse to impress, containing the anxiety to please, containing the urgency to explain oneself. It is the tension between desire and self-control that generates fascination. Jung saw the unconscious as a living reservoir. Nothing we hide disappears. Everything continues to act beneath the surface. Therefore, when someone integrates their shadows and accepts their instincts, they convey a perceptible inner order. It doesn't matter if they wear simple or luxurious clothes. The body only expresses what the soul already contains. This is where the first rule comes in. Never make the first move. Most people feel the need to fill the silence, to justify their presence, to adapt to others' expectations. But true magnetism comes from those who can hold the space without flinching. When someone doesn't rush to be accepted, they turn silence into gravity. And gravity breeds curiosity, the natural gateway to desire. The second rule is clear. Don't seek to conquer. Make yourself discovered. Those who try to impress reveal their neediness. The eye perceives the attempt even before the ear catches the word. The most attractive person is not the one who forces attention, but the one who inhabits their own completeness. It is not arrogance, it is inner peace. This state is the mark of the archetype of the silent sage, one who has already reconciled their contradictions and therefore does not need to beg for approval. Jung reminded us that libido is not just sexual energy, but the life force itself. When this force is contained and directed, the person stops seeking validation and starts offering experience. The third rule is to master presence before trying to make yourself present. Presence is not noise, it is not performance, it is density. Magnetic people do not announce themselves, they become memorable because they create a field wherever they are. They do not compete for space, they sustain their own gravity. This is where the real mystery lies. Magnetism is not about explanation, but about suggestion. It is not about immediate delivery, but about leaving traces. The unconscious loves symbols, and every pause, every ambiguous gesture, every charged silence becomes a symbol. The body speaks without permission, but when someone has learned to master their impulses, that body speaks differently. The gaze becomes denser, the touch more intentional, the breathing more rhythmic. Everything communicates, and this communication is perceived not only by the other person, but by the collective unconscious, which responds instinctively to universal symbols of strength, freedom, and depth. Thus, magnetism is not a technique, but a state of being. It is not something that can be imitated, but something that is revealed when the soul is integrated. Those who master this state do not need to chase after it. It becomes a presence that attracts effortlessly. Jung would say that the magnetic soul is one that has made its own shadows the raw material for its strength. Therefore, it is not enough to train gestures or repeat phrases. It is necessary to cross the inner darkness, reconcile instincts, accept desire without fear. Only then does presence cease to be superficial and become unforgettable. This is the foundation of the entire path. Magnetism is not found in what is shown, but in what is contained. It is born from the alchemy between silence and intensity, desire and control, shadow and light. When you invest your energy in observing rather than showing off, something changes in the invisible field that sustains you. Most believe that presence is about being noticed, but the true weight of a soul is not in the number of words it throws to the wind, but in the silent density it carries within itself. Presence is not volume, it is gravity. Carl Jung understood that the unconscious manifests itself not only in dreams or symptoms, but also in what radiates from us without control. The body is only the veil of a deeper energy. Magnetic people do not need to compete for attention because they have become natural centers of a field that cannot be faked. Their strength lies in the way they look little, but leave a mark, how they touch little, but leave traces that burn in the memory. This strength comes from a simple secret: mindfulness. Being fully present without seeking anything, without projecting anything, just sustaining one's own wholeness before the world. This is the root of magnetism. It is possible to be the center without being the focus because the focus is distraction, but the center is substance. Those who master the art of presence also learn the art of anticipation. The human brain is not driven by the reward itself, but by the anticipation of it. Neuroscience has already demonstrated dopamine is not triggered by what we receive, but by the interval in which we believe we will receive something. Desire is not fed by possession, but by possibility. It is in this empty space, in this strategic delay, that fascination is born. Magnetism, therefore, is not haste, but cadence. It is looking at the exact moment when silence calls for words. It is retreating at the moment when the body cries out for touch. It is remaining silent when the explanation has already become noise. Those who explain too much eliminate mystery, and where there is no mystery, there is no eros. Jung spoke of the tension of opposites as the engine of psychic transformation. And what is seduction if not this dance between proximity and retreat, revelation and concealment, access and distance, approaching and then withdrawing, leaving doors ajar instead of wide open? The soul does not fall in love with what it understands, but with what it feels it needs to decipher. The unconscious, that archaic territory that secretly governs us, responds to symbols and not to linear logic. That is why a gesture interrupted at the right moment is worth more than 1,000 words. A pause carries more eros than a torrent of declarations. Absence, well managed, becomes language. At this point, we understand the third rule of magnetism. It is not necessary to impose oneself to become unforgettable. The mistake many make is to seek to conquer, to display qualities, to spend energy trying to impress. Nothing is more repellent than the explicit gesture of wanting to be desired. True power does not seek conquest but revelation. It does not ask for attention but becomes discovered. This is the archetype of the silent sage, the being who has already made peace with their abysses and therefore does not need to beg for approval. Jung reminded us that libido is not just sexual energy but the very force of life itself. Those who learn to contain and direct it convert raw desire into spiritual density. Magnetism, then, is not performance, but an inner state. It is born of silence that does not fear discomfort, of absence that becomes invitation, of tension that does not break before its time. And when this state manifests itself, the gaze gains density, the touch carries symbolic weight, the breath dictates a rhythm that the other unconsciously follows. Here is the big key. Magnetism is not produced. It is revealed. It is not found in excess, but in precision. It is not force that imposes itself, but cadence that sustains itself. It is in this restrained rhythm, in this dance between presence and absence, that the soul discovers its ability to awaken desire not only in the body, but in the unconscious of the other. And when the unconscious is touched, nothing can erase the mark left behind. Thus, true power lies not in the gesture itself, but in what it suggests. Mystery is the fire that keeps the fascination alive, and only those who have learned to wait understand that time is the quietest weapon of attraction. Those who understand magnetism know that the impact is not in excess but in precision. It is like a pianist facing silence. It is not enough to play loud or soft. You have to play the exact note at the moment when silence begs for sound. The same is true of human presence. It is not the quantity of words or gestures that creates fascination, but the right time at which they arise. Carl Jung taught us that psychic life is guided by synchronicities, those mysterious moments when the inner and outer worlds meet in perfect harmony. It is in this invisible space that magnetism occurs. Those who are whole within themselves, attentive and alert, perceive the subtle movement of the eyes, the slight opening of the body, the breath that changes rhythm before any conscious gesture. Those who are distracted force, those who are present capture. This mastery of emotional timing is like a dance. The dancer who tries to lead before it is time steps on their partner. The one who waits too long misses the music. Magnetism is rhythm, the ability to move with the other without losing one's own axis. That is why a magnetic presence is never invasive. It adjusts without canceling itself out. It envelops without imprisoning. It enters the other's field as if it already belonged to them, but withdraws at the peak, leaving a fertile absence. This strategic withdrawal is not an escape, but the creation of memory. The human brain does not cling to what has been fully resolved, but to what has been suspended, to what has not been completed. The memory that returns is not the most intense, but the most unfinished. Fascination arises from the interval, not from fullness. Hence the fifth rule: use absence as language. Most believe that constant presence is synonymous with bonding, but anything that is repeated too often loses its value. The body does not respond in the same way to continuous stimulation. Intentional absence, on the contrary, creates contrast, giving clarity to what was once habitual. Conscious disappearance transforms presence into a ghost, and ghosts are more seductive than tangible presences because they inhabit the territory of the imagination. Jung said that where there is no consciousness, destiny manifests itself. When someone withdraws at the right moment, they allow the other's unconscious to complete the scene, fill the void, project images. And this active participation is what generates a psychic bond, not just an encounter of bodies, but of symbols. But it is necessary to understand. True absence is not manipulation. Those who withdraw out of revenge or calculation reveal a lack. Those who disappear with elegance without anxiety demonstrate confidence in their own trail. It is not rejection, it is a silent invitation. Do you still feel me even without seeing me? This is the question that echoes without words. And if the answer is yes, the bond is created. This strategic absence sets the stage for the sixth rule: turning touch into a portal. Most people touch out of need, impulse, or haste, but magnetic touch is charged with intention. It is not mechanical, but symbolic. It arises when the body is emotionally ready to receive it, and is therefore absorbed as a transformative experience. A finger that slides a few millimeters further than necessary, a hand that rests calmly on the shoulder, a light and unexpected pressure on the arm. Small gestures but with immense density, because they are not born of reflex, but of consciousness. Jung said that the body carries psychic content. A gesture conveys not only physical contact, but information. Conscious touch awakens the limbic system, activates memories, and connects ancestral instincts. This type of touch is not forgotten because it speaks directly to the unconscious. And everything that descends into the depths of the psyche gains the weight of eternity. The body may forget the gesture, but the soul retains the impact. Thus, we understand that magnetism is not the sum of rehearsed words or repeated techniques, but the ability to transform minimal gestures into unforgettable symbols. An absence can become a presence stronger than any proximity. A touch can become a portal to memories that never fade. And it is in this balance between presence and retreat, between touch and silence, that the true art of attraction is revealed. Not superficial attraction, but that which leaves invisible and lasting marks on the unconscious of the other. Carl Jung said that the body carries psychic content, which is why a gesture can carry much more than contact. It can convey care, strength, confidence. Those who touch with presence not only touch, but communicate a silent truth that crosses the space between two souls. Touch, in this sense, is a map, not a map to be conquered, but deciphered. Most people touch too much and feel too little. Magnetic people do the opposite. They touch little, but they touch right. This precision awakens the most primitive centers of the human brain. The limbic system responds to the warmth of the skin, the rhythm of breathing, subtle changes in the gaze. That is why true seduction does not happen through what is seen, but through what is felt. A touch can be slow, almost imperceptible, and yet carry more depth than 1,000 declarations. Because it is not born of haste but of restraint. Desire tends to rush us, but magnetism is born of those who desire without giving in to urgency. This mastery is rare. It requires energy to be transmuted, not repressed. Jung understood desire as raw material, a force that, if channeled, can be transformed into a penetrating gaze, a subtle gesture, an engaging presence. When restrained without repression, desire becomes silent electricity, vibrating in the air, infecting the environment. It does not need to be explicit. It suffices to be present as a field. But there is an even deeper secret. Those who are magnetic do not tell their whole story. They suggest, leave blank spaces, create symbols that the other needs to complete. This silent game calls upon the imagination, and imagination is the territory of the unconscious. Jung claimed that the psyche seeks completeness. Thus, when someone becomes a symbol of something that is missing in us, we are naturally attracted. This is how fascination is created, not by being complete, but by becoming a mirror of a hidden desire. Not by being obvious, but by being enigmatic enough for the unconscious to keep trying to decipher. Magnetism is not about being desirable, but about being unforgettable. This is the seventh rule. Never repeat patterns. Human desire dies in predictability. The unconscious needs movement, surprise, renewal. And that is precisely why so many relationships become empty. Not because of a lack of love, but because of the exhausting repetition of the same gestures, the same words, the same schedules. Routine numbs the senses and extinguishes the sparkle. Jung reminded us that psychic energy is organized in spirals, never in straight lines. This means that everything that remains identical loses its vital force. Magnetism, therefore, requires variation. Today you are heat, tomorrow you are a breeze. Today you dive deep, tomorrow you just float on the surface. This dance of nuances keeps the field alive and awake. But it is necessary to understand. Variation is not chaos. A change in vibration cannot be confused with emotional instability. The magnetic soul does not change moods, it changes tones. Sometimes it is fire, other times fog, and it is precisely this controlled alternation that keeps desire alive. Fascination is fueled by the unexpected. When the other never knows exactly what they will find, but knows they will find something alive, the emotional memory remains open. Magnetism lives on this boundary between familiarity and mystery. If everything is new, it scares. If everything is the same, it cools. The art is in varying within the same inner cadence. Those who understand this dynamic realize that magnetism is not about trapping the other, but about unleashing a constant hunger in them. Magnetic presence does not seek predictability. It seeks to create a unique experience that can never be reproduced by anyone else. Because the body can repeat gestures, but the psychic energy that sustains them is unrepeatable. Here's the secret. Magnetism is not maintained by the force of repetition, but by the grace of surprise. When the other person feels that each encounter brings something new, even if it's just a new nuance of silence, a slightly deeper look, a different pause, desire is renewed like a flame that never goes out. Thus, we understand that fascination is not the work of techniques, but of psychic vitality. Those who live fully in flux, in constant renewal, transmit an energy that never becomes monotonous. And this energy is the true antidote to boredom, which is the greatest enemy of desire. Fascination is not sustained only by what is seen, but by what remains invisible, almost untouched. Magnetism is, in essence, a game between the conscious and the instinctive, between what is offered and what is retained. Therefore, understanding primitive instincts is key. Desire is not born of rationality, but of the ancestral body, the reptilian brain, which responds to subtle signals of breathing, gaze, movement. Carl Jung said that the psyche is both personal and collective. This means that we carry within us not only individual experiences, but also memories that belong to the species. It is at this collective level that archetypes operate. When someone embodies the figure of the silent hunter, the intuitive goddess, or the serene sage, they awaken unconscious responses that come from millennia of evolution. It is not just a matter of physical presence. It is the activation of symbols engraved in our deepest memory. That is why certain looks disarm us, certain voices haunt us, certain presences mark us forever. They speak not to the ego, but to the instinct. True seduction is not built on words, but on ancestral codes that transcend the conscious mind. Hence the 8th rule: trigger primitive instincts. This is not manipulation, but recognition of human nature. We are beings shaped by time, and what we now call desire is a legacy of survival strategies engraved in our bodies. The rhythm of speech, the cadence of breathing, the way one occupies space, all of this triggers unconscious mechanisms. Among these signals, the gaze is perhaps the most powerful. We don't just look to see, but to touch. A gaze that lingers a second longer than expected creates tension. A gaze that shifts away too quickly conveys insecurity. A gaze that fixes too intently threatens. But a calm gaze, laden with unspoken intention, hints at possibilities. And where there is possibility, there is fantasy. Fantasy is the food of desire. A touch can be forgotten, a gaze cannot. The gaze penetrates layers that the skin cannot reach. It plants images that the unconscious continues to work on, even when the other is no longer present. That is why a single moment of shared silence, when charged with density, can become more unforgettable than years of living together. This understanding leads us to the 9th rule: create sensory dependence. This is not about destructive addiction, but about signature. Every human being has unique gestures, smells, tones, rhythms. The magnetic person knows how to transform this into language, into a trademark that cannot be copied. When someone associates deep pleasure with a specific gesture, a particular tone of voice, a sequence of approaches that is never repeated exactly the same, desire begins to seek not just any kiss, but that kiss. Not just any touch, but that touch. It is the birth of a psychic signature that captivates not through control, but through uniqueness. This is the secret of unforgettable presences. They not only offer moments, but build sensory memories that are impossible to replace. Even if the other's body finds new experiences, there will always be a void, a gap that only that psychic field can fill. Jung reminded us that symbols live in the collective unconscious. To become a symbol is to become unforgettable. Not as a person, because people are replaceable, but as an experience. And that is what differentiates the fleeting from the eternal. The fleeting fades when absent. The eternal continues to vibrate in memory, in the body, in dreams. Magnetism, therefore, is not about the number of encounters, but about the depth of memories. An absence marked by a sensory signature can scream louder than 1,000 superficial presences. This is what transforms a human being into emotional territory. One does not just want to be with them, but to feel again what only they have awakened. Deep down, it is this incompleteness that keeps desire alive. The unconscious yearns for symbols, and when it finds one, it cannot easily let go. Absence, in this case, is not forgetfulness, but memory in the form of longing. True magnetism does not imprison the other in visible chains, but envelops them in invisible bonds, in which memory and desire intertwine. And once this field is created, physical distance matters little. The presence remains alive, pulsing within. It is not just any presence that leaves a mark, but one that becomes a unique experience. Someone can copy your perfume, your style, even your gestures. But what no one can reproduce is the psychic field you create when you are whole within yourself. That is what makes a human being unforgettable. Not their appearance, but their atmosphere. Carl Jung said that the unconscious feeds on symbols, and true magnetism happens when you become a symbol of something that the other still seeks to complete. You are not remembered as one person among many, but as an emotional territory that no one else offers. It is not the lack of the body that disturbs, but the absence of vibration, that rare density that seemed to fill invisible spaces. The common mistake is to believe that self-control is the absence of desire. It is not. Desire is essential. It is what warms the gaze, gives truth to the gesture, vibrates in the silence. The problem is not desiring, but kneeling before urgency. Those who master magnetism desire intensely but hold the reins of their own fire. Desire shines through, but it does not rule. It is visible, but it is not the master. Jung compared inner transformation to the alchemical process. Raw material must be refined until it becomes gold. Desire is that raw material. If repressed, it rots. If given free rein, it devours. But when transmuted, it becomes a vital force, an aura, magnetism. It is the fire that warms without burning, that illuminates without destroying. It is at this point that magnetism ceases to be seduction and becomes transcendence. The body ceases to be just a body. It becomes a vehicle of presence. The encounter ceases to be merely physical. It becomes a spiritual experience. Desire ceases to seek only pleasure. It begins to seek elevation. The human being who reaches this state does not only conquer bodies, but touches souls. Their presence is not just attraction, it is medicine. It heals wounds without promising anything, awakens power in others just by existing in its entirety. It is not what it says, it is what it is. And because of this, it becomes an emotional reference, a voice that continues to echo days later, a touch that still pulses on the skin even when absent, an absence that weighs more than the presence of many, because every gesture was loaded with intention, every silence was full of density, every glance was a symbol of something greater. At this point, the individual ceases to be a character and becomes an archetype. They represent not only themselves, but a universal force that touches the collective unconscious. Jung would say the individual becomes a symbol, and symbols do not die. They continue to inhabit dreams, memories, desires, even when the person is no longer present. This is true power. Not to manipulate, but to transform. Not to seduce, just to possess, but to awaken. Not to imprison the other in chains, but to set them free to grow. Magnetism, when conscious, ceases to be a game and becomes a path. It does not seek external validation because it has already found internal completeness. From here on, nothing you did before will be enough. You won't just want to be attractive. You'll want to be unforgettable. You won't just want to win someone over. You'll want to be someone who is not forgotten. Your touch will be more conscious. Your silence, more eloquent. Your absence, more powerful. Your presence, when it appears, will transform the environment. Because magnetism is not a technique. It is a philosophy of life. It is applied psychology. It is refined energy that, once awakened, can no longer be ignored. Carl Jung said that what you integrate emanates from you. Now it is your turn to integrate desire, shadow, presence, and let them become light. If this made sense to you, leave your support of any value and help keep this space alive. Write in the comments a word that marks your commitment to evolution, a word that brings the spirit of this path. Write presence, fire, symbol, and remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel. What begins with desire can end in awakening.